Hello, this is Joel Wolfe from Christian Home Church in Blountstown, Florida. I want to give a few comments on demonic forces and on what sometimes are called generational curses. As we struggle with things in our lives and things are difficult and they're like weeds or thorns that are built up in our life and we're trying to overcome them, Satan, we can recognize, uses those things in our lives. He wants to discourage us. He wants to tell lies. And Ephesians 6, that whole area of 10 through 12 or 10 through 20, where it's talking about the spiritual armor, it begins by saying we wrestle against, and it describes all kind of spiritual evil forces or wicked forces that are against us. And these things are things we wrestle with the truth of the gospel. And that's what the armor represents, different areas. And so as we try to apply the reality of our being crucified with Christ to our lives, the reality is as well, Satan is wanting to come against us. Satan was wanting to bring discouragement and keep us in bondage to those things. And so there is a role that these evil spirits play in trying to keep us bound. But on that, I do want to encourage you, Colossians 2:15, in talking about the power of the cross in our lives, says that through the cross, he disarmed or he stripped the rulers and authorities or the principalities and powers, those forces that come against us. Their power has been taken through Christ's work on the cross. And so previously I've talked about a process of coming into the presence of God and focusing on his love and on his crucifixion and bringing our temptations or things that bind us or past hurts or memories into God's presence and trusting God to work through that over time of bringing healing and wholeness to us. And just as an add-on to that, as we go through that process, we can pray, God, disarm the spiritual forces that are coming against me. And we can apply the truth and trust that the power of the gospel will free us and deliver us from spiritual bondages and powers. The authority and power of Christ is there through the cross to win the victory over these forces in our life. If it's something that is a concern of yours, in addition to just praying about that, feel free to find someone that you would trust and look to pray for you, that there would be freedom and deliverance from those evil forces that would want to come against your life. That can be a beneficial thing to do. But know that there is power in the cross. And those things, though there can be a battle, that battle can be won because we do wrestle against these forces, but God has equipped us to win the victory. The other thing that I want to mention is there are sometimes what people have described as generational curses. Now, the Bible doesn't use that term, and the basic text of these is in the two places that the Bible records the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. And in those passages, God is talking about that they should not have idols or any image and worship those things or serve them. And for instance, just quoting Exodus 20, verse 5, it says, "For I, Yahweh your God, or the Lord your God," Yahweh is a Jewish word for Lord, "am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and on the fourth generation of those who hate me, and showing loving kindness to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Now, the way that this is presented sometimes is this is a curse that has come on, that if previous generations have sinned against God, that curse follows down to you. And there is a reality about that things that our parents or their parents have done in their sinfulness, they can move down and affect us and be part of who we are. But I want us to look at this truth in a certain encouraging light rather than a discouraging light. Because you could look at your past and say, well, man, my ancestors have always had alcohol problems, or they've always had anger problems, or they've always had sexual problems. And those can be realities, that there is a pattern that is seen over generations. But what I would want us to consider, even as we read this scripture, is let's not get a misconception of God in this process. God talks about this pattern because he's a jealous God. What does that mean? He's jealous because what he wants is not the punishment. He wants the inclusion of those in his people. And they have rejected him in their sinfulness, and they're worshiping idols. And he's saying, hey, I'm not going to forget this. I'm going to visit this multi-generationally. And I believe the reason that he's doing it multi-generationally is because he wants to draw that family back to him. He wants those sins to be dealt with, and that family line to be delivered from that. And so the one generation, the first generation, they may deserve destruction and death, but God says, well, I'm not going to just wipe them out. No, I'm going to move it over 3 or 4 generations so that there's chance in my jealousy for them to respond to me and come back to me. Notice this is something that is multi-generational for who? For those who hate me. These aren't people that are repenting and serving God and trying to get right with God. These are people that are worshiping other gods. And God is saying, hey, I long for you. I long for your family line to be restored to fellowship with me. So I'm going to give you multiple generations of chances to get this right. And as even we read the passage, he says, hey, this evil things, I'll carry it over to 3 or 4 generations. But hey, my kindness, my loving kindness, I just demonstrate that to thousands who love me and keep my commandments. His love and his kindness is so much greater than this thought of moving something down the generational lines. And so that truth of generational curses, I say that to say, if you hear that teaching or you recognize this is something that has been in me and it's been in my family line for years, don't use that as something to say, boy, I'm discouraged, I'm stuck in this, I'm in bondage to this. No, use that to say, hey, wait a minute. God is giving me and my family multiple generations even to seek him, to get free from this. And so, God, I'm going to trust you that in my life, in my generation, you will accomplish as I surrender to you and as I love you and seek you and desire your work in my life. I'm going to trust you to deliver me and my family line from this. And so don't let that discourage you. Don't let thought of demonic forces discourage you. There is power in God for deliverance and for freedom in your life. Now, I encourage you just in those thoughts and another recording that I've given about the crucifixion of Christ being ours and our being identified with him in that death. And through that, the possibility of, through faith in him, applying that truth and him spiritually so working in our lives to bring us life and freedom and wholeness. I pray that these thoughts are encouraging to you, and I pray that God's freedom and new life will be given birth and will grow and flourish, and the spring of the Spirit of power will operate in your life and overflow in you abundantly.